Hello, today we're going to continue reviewing input-output tables. As a reminder, we use an input-output table to describe a function. The table below is for the function y equals x plus 2. Now notice y equals x plus 2 is our equation to describe this input-output table. Every input-output table will have an equation to describe what is happening there and what is that relationship between the input and the output. Now, this equation is used to help us find potentially any missing values in this table. Now, notice here our input is 1 and our output is 3. Now, that equation is telling us x plus 2. So if we add 2 to my x value of 1, 1 plus 2 is 3. Here, 2 plus 2 is 4, and notice that's giving me an output of 4. Here we have 3 plus 2 gave me 5. And notice there's my pattern. That pattern helps me to identify my equation. And now 4 plus 2 is 6, which is giving me that output there. Now notice here also described exactly what we did, and notice my pattern is adding 2, which was exactly what my equation is describing is happening in this input-output table. In this problem here, they're giving us a description already. The description is the output is 1 less than the input. Okay, that is your equation that is also helping you identify your pattern. So you can write that equation just like this. Y equals x minus 1. The output is 1 less than my input. My input is known as my x value. My output is known as my y value. Now, in this table down here, they already started using that equation. 2 minus 1 is 1. 3 minus 1 is 2. 4 minus 1 is 3. 5 minus 1 is 4. Notice that pattern of subtracting 1 to each input value gives you your output. And that is your pattern here, and that pattern helps you to identify the equation. In this next problem here, the output is twice the input. That's giving me an equation of y equals 2x, or y equals 2 times x. Now notice my x value here is 0. 2 times 0 is 0. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. 9 times 2 is 18. Notice how they match up together, and that pattern of multiplying by 2, which was identified in my equation, helps me fill in this input-output table. And notice your goal here is to also look for those patterns to help you solve these problems today. In this next problem here, we have an input-output table. They're giving us our input represented as in, or you can also say this as your x value, and your output or out is y. So they're giving us a rule of subtract 5. That means for every input, I'm going to subtract 5 to give me my output. So if I do 10 minus 5, I'm left with 5. If I do, and I'll write minus 5, so now if I have 10 minus 5, I'm left with 5. If I have 13 minus 5, I'm left with 8. 14 minus 5, I'm left with 9. 19 minus 5, I'm left with 14. And notice that's how you get your outputs to help you fill in this table. And notice for every single input value in this specific table, I was following the given rule of subtracting 5 to every input. Each table is going to describe a different relationship on what's going on here, but you have to make sure you're reading the directions. Now, these patterns that we're dealing with in 5th grade can either be adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing. In this problem, it clearly states we're subtracting 5, and that's what you are doing to every value. In this next problem, we actually have an input-output table. We have a missing value, and we also need to figure out what the rule is. Now, once I can figure out what the rule is, it will help me identify the missing value. So if I look here, I have 0 as my input and 2 as my output. So if I do 0 times a number, I'm going to get 0 again, which my output's 2. If I do 0 divided by something, I'll get 0. So multiplying and dividing can't work here. And subtracting, I go into negatives, and we have a positive. So 0 plus 2 could be a potential rule. But let's just confirm that by checking the other values I have. Let's see, 4 plus 2 is also 6. 9 plus 2 is also 11, so it looks like I have my rule of adding 2, or you can just select add 2. So it looks here by the given values in my table, I was already able to identify a rule. Now that I know my rule, I can find the missing value here. So 10 plus 2 is 12. And that's my missing value in the table. Notice it's very important to look at what is given to you in the original problem to help you figure out what you need to find in the problem. In this next problem here, our goal, we have a chart, we need to figure out the rule. So by looking at this input-output table that's already given to me, I'm going to start with my first input value of 2. And I notice it's going to my output of 8. So if I do 2 divided by something, I'm not going to get a larger number of 8. So division can't work. And if I do 2 minus something, it's not going to, if I take away something from here, we're going to get a smaller number, we have a larger number. So if I do 2 plus 6, that does give me 8. But I notice here that if I do 5 plus 6, I don't get 20. But let's try multiplication. 2 times 4 is 8. And I notice here, if I do 5 times 4, that also gives me 20. So that could be our rule, but let's just check the other values to confirm. So 6 times 4 is 24, so that works. And 7 times 4 is 28. So my rule here would be multiply 4. And notice I'm doing that to every single input value. Okay, that's creating our pattern. Our pattern here is multiplying by 4. And you're going to find that once you identify that pattern, it's the same for every input-output, for every input value in that input-output table. Now this question here, we need to figure out the rule, and once we figure out that rule, it will help us find that missing piece in our table. So I notice my first value here, I have 15, and then my output is 3. So it's getting smaller, so that means multiplying and addition are not going to be valid here, but I could do division or subtraction. So if I do 15 minus 12, that does get me 3. But if I do 45 minus 12, that doesn't get me 9. But I do know that 15 divided by 5 is 3. So that could be a rule, but let's just check the other values. 45 divided by 5 is 9, so that does work. And 50 divided by 5 is 10. So it looks like my rule here is divide by 5. Now I'm dividing by 5 for every single input value. So now to find my missing output value, I'm going to also do 20 divided by 5, which gives me that missing value of 4. So notice in these problems, it's very, very important to first identify that rule. Look for patterns to help you figure out the rule in the input-output table. Then it will make it much easier when you're finding those missing values. As always, you can refer back to this video at any time posted on my YouTube channel.